All right, so you sent over this article about open offices, and it's pretty interesting stuff.
Yeah, it's from this Danish publication called Berlingske, I think.
Yeah, Berlingske.
And it's been making the rounds lately, so I thought you might find it interesting for a deep dive.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it seems like everyone's talking about the future of the office these days, right? Especially after we all got that taste of working from home during the pandemic.
Definitely. And this article really digs into how offices are adapting post-pandemic. All that buzz about open offices being the key to collaboration and innovation. Well,
What happened to all of that?
right, like did it actually live up to the hype?
Exactly. Like, I remember when those big open plan offices were like the coolest thing,
Yeah, everyone wanted one.
but then everyone was suddenly working from their kitchen tables.
And you know what? A lot of people found out they could be just as productive at home. Maybe even more productive.
Without all the distractions. I mean,
Yeah.
come on. You've tried to focus in an open office with like a million conversations happening around you,
Oh, yeah, totally. This article actually brings up that tension. The initial promise of open offices versus the reality.
which is a lot of noise and distractions.
Exactly. And what's interesting is this isn't just a Danish thing. The article points out that it's a global phenomenon.
Oh, I bet. I'm sure a ton of our listeners have worked in an open office at some point.
Probably most of them.
Yeah. And, those struggles firsthand, trying to concentrate with all the chatter, the lack of privacy, it's tough.
It can be brutal. And then suddenly everyone's forced to work from home and it's like a revelation. You can actually get stuff done. And you have
Mhm.
peace and quiet. It's like the pandemic accidentally gave everyone a glimpse of what work could be like.
It's true. And now companies are trying to get everyone back into the office, but they're realizing they can't just offer free snacks and call it a day. They actually have to create a space that people want to be in.
Right, a space that supports well-being and productivity.
Otherwise, why bother?
Yeah, exactly. So this article focuses on what some companies in Denmark are doing, and it's pretty surprising. They're actually downsizing those massive open offices.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
Smaller open offices? I don't get it.
Yeah, it seems like the trend is moving towards smaller open spaces, maybe with like 6 to 8 workstations.
Huh. That's so different from what we're used to. Those huge open plan offices that just went on forever.
Totally different. It's a huge contrast. And it might be the key to finding that sweet spot between collaboration and focus.
I see. So you're still with your team, but it's not so overwhelming.
Exactly. And the article even quotes this researcher from Copenhagen Business School, Peter Holt Christensen. He says those massive open offices can be terrible for concentration, especially for tasks that require you to really think deeply.
That makes sense. It's like your brain can only handle so much input at once.
Right. It's overload.
So if we're making open offices smaller,
hmm
how do we make sure people can still collaborate effectively?
That's where the idea of activity-based working comes in. The article talks about this a lot.
I've heard that term, but I'm not sure I totally get it. What does it mean?
Basically, instead of everyone having an assigned desk, the office is designed with different zones for different activities.
So like a quiet zone for when you need to focus and then a different space for group projects.
Exactly. It's all about giving people options and flexibility so they can work in the way that best suits them and the task at hand. The article talks about moving away from those rigid layouts and creating more adaptable environments.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense. It sounds way more dynamic than the traditional open office setup. And it makes me think about another thing the article mentioned, hybrid work.
Ah, yes, that's huge right now.
I mean, with more people splitting their time between the office and home,
Mm.
how does that impact the way offices are used?
You're right. That's a really important point. And the article goes into it. It mentions that right now, the average office occupancy in Europe is around 60%.
60%, that's it.
Yeah, it's up slightly from 59% 6 months ago, but still way lower than the 70% we saw pre-pandemic.
Wow. So even though it's creeping up, it's still much lower than it used to be.
Yep. And they even pointed out that Mondays and Fridays are the slowest days.
With most people coming in Tuesday to Thursday.
It's a pretty clear pattern, and it kind of makes you think maybe people are coming in on those core days for the tasks that really benefit from face-to-face interaction.
Yeah, like brainstorming sessions or team meetings.
Exactly. It's almost like the office is becoming a destination for specific kinds of work, not just a place you have to be every day.
That's a huge shift. So far, it sounds like the open office isn't dead, but it's definitely getting a makeover.
A much-needed makeover.
Yeah, for sure. But before we get into the next part of our deep dive, I want to talk about how open offices can actually hurt productivity. Because the article highlighted some pretty interesting research on that.
Oh, yeah, for sure. The article really gets into that. It talks about how all that noise and interruption can actually make people less productive.
It's kind of ironic when you think about it. The whole point of open offices was to make people more collaborative.
Right. But sometimes it's like too much of a good thing.
Exactly. The article talks about how that constant buzz of activity can be super distracting.
Yeah. I mean, some background noise can be okay. Even stimulating sometimes.
Yeah, like at a coffee shop or something.
Right. But when it's nonstop, it can really overload your brain.
Yeah.
Especially when you're trying to concentrate.
I know exactly what you mean. It's like trying to read a book at a rock concert. You just can't focus.
That's a great analogy. And the article actually cites some studies that back this up. They found that this kind of environment can really hurt your cognitive performance.
Especially for tasks that require deep thinking, like problem solving or creative work.
Exactly. And you know what's even worse than the noise itself?
What's that?
The anticipation of being interrupted. You're constantly on edge waiting for someone to come up to your desk or for a loud conversation to start up nearby.
Oh my gosh, yes. It's like you can never really relax.
Even if you're wearing noise-canceling headphones.
Yeah, you still know that someone could interrupt you at any moment.
It's like having this low-level anxiety in the background all the time.
Ugh, it's the worst. You can never really get into a flow state because you're always bracing yourself for the next distraction.
And it can be totally exhausting. And you know another thing the article touches on? The lack of privacy?
Oh yeah, that's a big one. When you're surrounded by people all the time, it's hard to find even a minute to yourself.
To just recharge or think things through.
Right, or decompress after a tough meeting. Open offices don't really allow for that.
It's like you're always on, always performing for an audience.
Yeah.
And that can be really draining.
Okay, so given all these downsides, what are some solutions? We talked about activity-based working earlier, but are there other things companies can do to make their workspaces more productive?
That's a good question. The article doesn't really offer a complete list of solutions, but it does give us a starting point. We've already discussed activity-based working, so maybe let's explore that a bit further.
Okay, so what would that look like in practice?
Well, imagine a workplace with different zones for different types of tasks.
Okay, I'm picturing it. So what would those zones look like?
So you could have a quiet zone that's specifically designed for focused work. Think soundproofed individual pods, or maybe small rooms with soft lighting and comfy seating. The whole point is to minimize distractions and create a sense of calm.
That sounds amazing. Little sanctuary for deep work.
Exactly. And then for collaborative work, you'd have open spaces that are designed for brainstorming and teamwork.
So like big tables, whiteboards, comfortable seating that encourages people to interact.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe even some booths for smaller group discussions.
So it's not a one-size-fits-all approach.
Yeah.
It's about offering a variety of spaces to suit different needs.
Right. And don't forget about social zones. Those are super important for informal interactions, breaks, building relationships.
Like a nice lounge area or a well-equipped kitchen.
Exactly. Or maybe even an outdoor space. It's like creating a little ecosystem within the office.
I like that. A mini ecosystem.
Yeah.
And beyond those dedicated zones, are there other design elements that can make a difference?
Oh, yeah, for sure. The article doesn't really mention these, but they're definitely important considerations. For example, acoustic design is crucial in any workspace, but especially in open offices.
What do you mean by acoustic design?
Well, think about using sound-absorbing materials on the walls and ceilings. You can also use partitions to break up large spaces and minimize noise travel. Even something as simple as a white noise system can make a huge difference.
So it's not about eliminating all sound. It's about controlling it, making sure the soundscape is appropriate for the type of work being done.
Right. And then there's biophilic design.
Biophilic design? What's that?
It's basically incorporating elements of nature into the workspace.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's a cool concept.
Right.
And there's a lot of research showing that it can have some real benefits, like reducing stress, boosting creativity.
So like adding plants, maximizing natural light.
Exactly. Maybe even incorporating water features. It's all about creating a more calming and inspiring atmosphere.
Like bringing a little bit of the park into the office.
Exactly. And of course, we can't forget about technology.
Right. Got to have the right tools.
Yep. Providing employees with the right tech to support both individual and collaborative work is essential. Things like noise-canceling headphones, video conferencing systems, collaborative software platforms.
It's about making sure people can be successful no matter where they're working, whether it's from home, the office, or a mix of both.
Exactly. And I think it's also important to remember that creating a truly engaging workspace goes beyond just the physical environment. It's also about the culture.
What do you mean?
Well, it's about fostering a culture of trust, respect, flexibility. It's about giving people the autonomy to work in a way that best suits them and giving them control over their work schedules.
So it's not just about the desks and chairs. It's about how people feel about being in the office.
Exactly. It's about creating a sense of community and belonging, even in a hybrid or remote work setting.
That makes a lot of sense. So it sounds like the future of workspaces isn't just about designing better offices. It's about creating a better overall work experience.
Yeah, I completely agree. And while this article from Berlingske focuses on the Danish experience, it raises some really important questions about the future of work that are relevant everywhere.
It definitely has. It's given us a lot to think about. But there's one more aspect of the article I wanted to touch on. It mentioned that some companies in Denmark are actually moving away from open offices entirely. They're opting for individual offices instead.
Huh. Interesting. That seems like a complete reversal of the trend.
So why are some companies going back to individual offices? I mean, it seems like such a 180 from the open office trend.
Well, it's not like they're completely rejecting the idea of collaboration, but they are recognizing that different types of work require different environments.
Yeah, that makes sense. Not everything has to be a group project.
Right. Sometimes you need that quiet space to really focus and get things done. And for some people, that sense of privacy and control can really make a difference in their productivity. Imagine being able to shut out all of the distractions, personalize your space, really zero in on the task at hand.
Yeah, I can see that. It's like creating your own little haven of productivity. But doesn't that kind of go against the whole idea of fostering collaboration and teamwork?
Not necessarily. Remember, it's about finding the right balance. You can still have those dedicated spaces for collaboration within an office that also offers individual offices.
I see. So you could have your own office for when you need to focus, but then you'd go to a collaborative space for brainstorming sessions or team meetings.
Exactly. And this kind of setup can actually be better for collaboration because when people do come together, it's more intentional. They're not just constantly bumping into each other and chatting. They're coming together for a specific reason.
That's a good point. It's about quality over quantity when it comes to interaction. It's interesting to see how the pendulum is swinging back and forth between these different models.
It really is. And I think it just shows that there's no one-size-fits-all solution when it comes to designing workspaces. The key is to really understand the needs of your employees and the type of work they do, and then create an environment that supports both individual and collaborative work.
Well, this has been a super fascinating deep dive into the world of office design. It seems like the open office is going through a bit of an identity crisis.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say that the open office isn't going away, but it's definitely being rethought.
For sure. So what's the biggest takeaway here?
I think it's that the future of workspaces is all about flexibility and adaptability. It's about giving people choices, empowering them to work in the way that best suits them, and creating a culture that supports both individual focus and teamwork.
It sounds like the days of the one-size-fits-all office are over.
And that's a good thing. It's an exciting time to be thinking about the future of work. With a little creativity and a focus on the needs of employees, we can create workspaces that are not only productive, but also inspiring and enjoyable to be in.
Well said. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with a question. If you could design your ideal workspace, what would it look like? Would it be an open office, a private space, or a mix of both? This conversation has hopefully given you some food for thought about how to create a work environment that truly supports your best work. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning.